Rick Horrow, keeping score, business of tennis, business of life. A person who most young folks, unfortunately, unless they're really tennis fans, know him as an ESPN and formerly CBS personality. He's the real deal. He's a Grand Slam doubles winner. He's a Stanford grad, All-American there. He was the Davis Cup captain. He was part of the youth development program. He has a lot to say about the business of tennis and the business generally, and it's all good. Patrick McEnroe, how's that for an intro?
That sounds pretty good, Rick. I mean, that's going way back a few years in my Stanford days, but had a great run there. It was the tennis program out there. Obviously, the academics off the charts. The men's team is kind of gone south a little bit in the last decade or so, but the women's still going strong. They won the NCAA title this year, so good for the Cardinal.
Good for the Cardinal, and you led the team to titles in 86 and 88. At the risk of ending this interview abruptly, I didn't know you were that old.
You know, that's what I was saying. It's going way back. So those are great years, and you know, I love college tennis because college tennis was tennis being such an individual sport, as everybody knows, but the ability to play in a team and play for your school and play for your teammates. Obviously, we in the McEnroe family were always into playing for our country in Davis Cup, and probably the highlight of my professional career was being able to be the captain for 10 years for the Davis Cup team. So that was a huge honor, and you know, that's something that kids, I think, we try to keep them involved in tennis by being, you know, can still participate in the team aspect of it. And college tennis is just a great avenue for young players to aspire to. Obviously, the pros is a whole nother ball game as well. But college tennis was a great experience for me in my 4 years there.
Well, we'll get into that in a couple of minutes. But segue back from college tennis to giving back broadly defined, but your really, really, really good relationship with the USTA. The Davis Cup experience generally, you know, there are people you hear talk about obligation and you have to, and it impacts your longevity with the bigger tournaments and the majors. Obviously, you don't believe any of that. It's part of the evolution of it. How important is Davis Cup in the overall structure of tennis, would you say?
Well, it's a very good question. I would say it's not as important as it should be, Rick, and I think the reason, and we're seeing even now, you're looking at the Olympics coming up, and you're hearing about, you know, Steph Curry and I think LeBron James and other players saying, you know, they're not going to play in the Olympics for Team USA, you know, because they're beat up physically. But the reality is it's because it's financial, and you can understand that. And tennis is similar in that sense that the players, obviously, their bodies are what make them money. They have a short time period to make, you know, the big money that they're trying to make as players. There's no guaranteed contracts as there are in team sports. So I think that, you know, and the Davis Cup to me needs to be revamped in that it shouldn't be every year the way it is now. I'd like to see it be every other year. I'd also like to see tennis in the Olympics be more of a team concept. And right now it's just an individual tournament like any other tournament. It happens to just be the Olympic Games. But I would love to see you playing as a team representing your country, you know, similar to what they do in swimming or gymnastics where there are individual medals awarded, but you're also participating in a team event as well. So I think that would be a great way to go, but they're not listening to me on that front. But I think having tennis in the Olympics in general has been a positive for tennis and for the growth of the sport. And Davis Cup, too, while it's very popular at times in the countries that it's in, it doesn't, to me, have the global impact that it could have, you know, similar to the Ryder Cup or certainly the World Cup of soccer, which happen, you know, not every year.
Well, you know, they should listen to you more, and you listen to what your comments are, and you could really fill in the blanks with any number of business-oriented golf folks. The every other year Ryder Cup piece you just mentioned, the team-oriented aspect with the Olympics versus individual. You know, the Olympic golf is going to be another glorified stroke play, and obviously the Olympic piece important to some tennis players and, let's say, less important to others. So that change becomes very important, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so, and I think you know, I think tennis has become a bigger deal for the individual players. You know, since it came back into, I think it was in the mid '80s that it came back sort of as a trial sport, and it's a big deal. I mean, for a lot of these, you know, Roger Federer has talked about winning the gold medal in doubles as one of the highlights of his career. Here's a guy who's won 17 majors, arguably the greatest tennis player of all time, and he's talking about winning a doubles gold is a big deal. So I think it's become more important for the top players. It's going to happen, obviously, right in the middle this summer between Wimbledon and the U.S. Open. So it's a tough couple of months for the top players, especially that will be, looking to win gold or looking to win majors. And how about Novak Djokovic? You guys won 2 majors this year. He's the favorite certainly to win another Wimbledon title. Could you imagine winning all 4 majors and the Olympics? Steffi Graf did it back in the late 80s, so he's got a legitimate shot to pull that off.
Are you teasing the U.S. Open for us? Is that your trick here?
That's part of it. We had that great run with Serena last year, Serena Williams, who won all 3 last year, and she got into the semis of the Open. And I think the pressure, the attention, the intensity of all that finally got to her, understandably. So I still think that she's going to catch Steffi Graf and get 22 in total majors. She can do that at Wimbledon, which I think she's got a great chance to do that, and to win another major and hopefully for her catch Margaret Court. So it's amazing what she's been able to do. She's going to turn 35 this year. So,
yeah.
Tennis players normally are in their prime in their mid to late 20s. And I think it's just incredible that some of these athletes in tennis, like Federer and like Serena, are still playing at the highest level into their mid-30s.
How old are you?
Do you have to ask me that? I will be 50 in a matter of weeks, in fact.
Well, the reason I'm asking you is because, she's 35. Are you contemplating a comeback?
You know what? I play in the, sometimes they call it, in France they call it Les Légendes.
Yeah.
At Wimbledon, they call it the Gentleman's Invitational, and I just call it the Old Guys Tournament.
The Old Guys Tournament.
Yeah, the Old Guys Tournament. So when I see replays of my play there, and the lack of movement around the court compared to what happens in the real tennis these days, I'm perfectly happy playing what we call hit and giggle tennis.
Yeah, but listen, the bottom line of it is if you were to command a pretty significant sponsor patch as part of an endorsement, the camera would be on it a lot longer because you're not moving as fast.
That's a good point. Yeah. I got to try that in my next pitch.
Yeah, good pitch. So the other issue, too, obviously, the USTA Elite Player Development part, you were in it until 2014. Broadly defined, let's not worry about that particular program, but what do we do to wave a magic wand to get more young male athletes into the game?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm glad you said male because we have the most female players in the top 100, and I think we overall as a country are doing very well with continuing to have young women come through the pipeline. The male is trickier for a couple of reasons. Number one is just athletically, most of our best athletes will go towards other sports earlier, like baseball, football, basketball, etc. Whereas a lot of younger females, tennis is one of the few sports where great athletes can make a lot of money playing tennis. So I think that's part of it. One of the things we tried to address is just to have a more cohesive coaching philosophy around the country. I think, quite honestly, we've gone behind. We've fallen behind, I should say, in how we train our young kids and how we coach them, and I think Europe has far surpassed us in that area. So I think we made some real strides in trying to catch up and get us back to where you can't just assume that it's just going to happen if you get some good athletes playing tennis. You also have to teach them well, and tennis is a very skill-intensive sport. It takes a lot of repetition. A lot of balls need to be hit at a very young age to really develop those motor skills to become a great player. So I think we're starting to see some signs that we have the best group of young men coming up that we've had for a long time. They're all about 18, 19 right now, led by Taylor Fritz, who's top 100 player already, Francis Tiafoe, Michael Moe, Stefan Kozlov, Riley Opelka, Tommy Paul. All of these kids were very highly ranked internationally junior players and are all working their way up through the professional ranks. So I think this is the best group we've had in a while. And really, the X factor is, will any of them become, great players? That's something that's, obviously hard to predict, but I think we're going to have a chance with a couple of them.
So really, your stamp with the USTA and just your advocacy, you really think 2 or 3 years, no guarantees, we're going to see more American males getting to second weeks of stuff?
I think so, and I think we're going to have more. We're going to have more. You know, one of our goals always was, Rick, was to what I call flood the top 100. You know, because I'm not sure you can create a Serena Williams in a system, or a John McEnroe, or a Pete Sampras. You know, those are sort of freaks of nature. But I think what you can do is you can create a lot of really, really sound, good players, like France has done, like Spain has done, like Russia has done, particularly on the women's side, the Czech Republic on the women's side. And I think that we're starting to see that happen in our country, where all those players that I mentioned, I think, are legitimate top 100, top 50, and let's hope a couple of them can become top 10 players. Certainly the chances of, you know, Rafael Nadal became a legendary player, but Spain was producing loads and loads of top players for many years. And again, I'm not sure the system of what they did in Spain could create a Nadal, but certainly the environment of a lot of really, really good players and good professional players certainly helps the chances. You know, it's very unusual that Roger Federer came out of Switzerland, which doesn't have much of a tennis background, although, by the way, he left home at a young age and went to a program that the Swiss Tennis Federation ran when he was about 13 years old. So he was surrounded by, you know, a support system as a talented young junior. I think we're doing a better job of that in this country, but, you know, it's always that battle between, you know, should the private sector be doing it, the public sector, which is really the USTA. It's like the old, you know, individualism versus the government helping you. And that's sort of trying to find that balance of, you want that great kid and that great coach who are very driven, but you also want to, as the USTA, with the money and the resources that they have, be able to help facilitate those players becoming professionals, because it's more difficult than it's ever been to become a top professional tennis player.
And you and I both know that the government gets in significantly in a lot of other countries, and the government gets into sports here, from building facilities to everything in between. So while they shouldn't dominate, we all agree, I guess, they should certainly be involved. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that was always the balance that I tried to find with the USTA, because, you know, if you say the level of coaching needs to improve in this country, which I believe it does, you know, a lot of people get offended by that. A lot of people get upset. You know, hey, I'm a great coach. Don't tell me. You know, USTA shouldn't tell me what to do. And I think you have to find that balance where you have to not be afraid to piss some people off, but at the same time you have to work with them, because you do need them to help you, and you sort of all have to be at least somewhat on the same page. And I think there's some very good examples of players that have been helped by the USTA, but have also been very much supported by, of course, their family, number one, and their coaches along the way. And I think it has to be a team effort. You know, there's too many variables. It's very financially difficult, you know, to continue to support young players as they're going up the ranks, and everyone has to work together to try to make it happen.
Patrick McEnroe, Stanford grad, he doesn't need to say it, but one of the smartest guys in the room when it comes to the business of tennis. Speaking about the business, elevator speech, 30 seconds, where do you think it is? Do you think it is in a good place, or do you think a lot more needs to be done to improve the business broadly defined?
Well, I think that the business of the majors is incredibly successful. You know, the U.S. Open, Wimbledon, et cetera, and the other big tournaments like the one in Indian Wells and Miami. Those tournaments are all incredibly successful from a professional standpoint. Where we're struggling is the mid-level tournaments in this country. And I think part of the reason we're struggling with those events is because we don't have enough top American players. You know, and back in the day when my brother and Connors, you know, they used to support those tournaments because they were American. And then Agassi and Sampras and Chang and Courier, they used to support them because they would play tournaments in their country. Where now you have most of the top male players are European. So the Djokovic and Federers and Nadals, they're going to support tournaments that are closer to home, and they're only going to come here when they have to. And that means to play the U.S. Open and to play a couple other big tournaments. So I think that it's almost like the rich getting richer and the small struggling a little bit. So the USTA is certainly always trying to help, and has actually, you know, bought the tournament in Cincinnati and tried to support some of the smaller tournaments so they don't go overseas. But, you know, having better young American players would certainly help. And I think that's where you would see the payoff in those types of events. And hopefully with this group of young males coming up, and some good young females as well, like Sloane Stephens and Madison Keys, that are a little bit more established already, that could help that sort of mid-level market, I like to call it.
Just a couple quick more, Patrick McEnroe. Internationally, from a governance and a business perspective, do the men's tournaments and the women's tournaments get along? Are they doing it better than they used to?
Oh, they get along very well. I mean, obviously the majors, there's been a big issue for equal prize money at all the majors, which now happens, and at the other events where the men and women play at the same tournament. So if they're selling sponsorships and selling tickets as one event, men and women, certainly that should continue to happen and does happen. Tennis is by far the most equal when it comes to professional sports in paying men and women. At the same time, there are tournaments that are just on the ATP tour, which is a men's tour, are more better sponsored and have better attendance overall than women's only tournaments on the WTA tour. So there's always that balance of finding that right mark. But I think tennis has it. It's not perfect, but it's as close to being as equal and as equitable as any other professional sport out there. There's no doubt about that.
Most important question from a brotherly perspective, and you watch Venus and Serena play finals in tournaments all the time, and you probably think back, maybe not, probably shouldn't. 91, you're sitting there, your first career singles final. Do you talk to your brother and say, come on, man? No, don't do that.
Well, let me tell you this. My brother and I have a long history and very competitive at times. Obviously, he was by far the better player. We all know that. But that was a one chance that I actually could have beaten him. Where I was in the middle of my career, in my prime. He was at the tail end of his career. So if there was one time that I actually could have won, that might have been the match, but I don't know.
And you lost 6-4 in the third, man.
I lost 6-4 in the third. It was a close match, but I don't think he ever would have talked to me if I had won that match. So he had that big brother complex. Big brother can't lose to little brother. So I'm not going to say I threw the match because it was so close, but did I really, really deep in my heart want to win that match? Oh, I don't know. It's hard for me to answer that one. I could tell you one thing. He deep in his heart really, really didn't want to lose to his little brother.
Well, quite clearly, and that's a good way to end it, because this guy on the phone has risen to great heights, not only from the media perspective, but USTA, Davis Cup, and basically in many ways a conscious of the game and its future all over the globe. But Rick Horrow, the keeping score, we'll be back in a minute.